Hello there and welcome to the history of Zakrainian literature from ATP Projects. Another studio that I played a lot of games back in the day. I mean, at the kind of very beginning of this channel really. And I'm like, okay, let's play some of those free games I have stored up still and haven't touched. Yeah, but we played Gaku and Redux, really good game. Yes, I'm browsing through the website right now. The question, I believe we played, what else? We played Moraine Crisis, about a little bit of an F1 driver, right? Old timer, Umeda Sky, that was pretty interesting as well. Aurora Fall, really good story as well, I believe. And have we played anything else? I think that's about it. Yeah, and yeah, basically today we are jumping into the history of Zakrainian literature, which was released in 2019, so not that long ago. I mean, technically also in March, so 2 years. Let's see what this is about. 2019. Year before... Well, we know what kind of year. What was the most influential nation in the history of literature? What country comes to mind? Belauca with their strong roots in poetry? Or Scale and the numerous novels written by the authors from there? Or even Carpia, which is where the modern novella was born. All this has centuries of history and tens of thousands of works to their name. And yet, ask yourself honestly, what is the greatest novel ever written? That's Cirque by Aglae Garisuki. And what is the greatest short story ever written? Exactly. Florianka by Natalie Kuznetsova. And then there is the one book that everyone will in the end agree on as the best novella ever written. And for my money, the best actually not for mine, okay? Authors. And for my money, the best literary piece, period. The Summer by Odette Kawamura Sheremenko. And all these authors, they were just a handful of artists, belonging to a small sovereign nation that lasted but a few years. They were Zakrainian writers. And I'm sure even decades after the country ceased to exist. And Zakrain is only as a bullet point on the city's tourist information leaflet. They all still identify as Zakrainian. As do I. Not I, okay? Not I. Whoever is speaking. Which is why I come back here every year. I'm just lending my voice to the guy. To where the print shop once stood. To reminisce, to recall the times when a group of people met who loved art so much that was then, who defined and made Zakrain into what it was. And now historians calling Zakrain a failed socio-political experiment. They are doing what bad writers do. Making up logic where none was. Creating a story where only feelings mattered. I love Zakrain, and so did she. Shiori Antonenko. The history of Zakrainian literature is, in a word, her. And every time I come here to see the places where everything happened, the memories all come back to me. 1992 spring. She cute. I was 23 when I first got acquainted with Shiori Antonenko. Back then she was a student at the University of Severodvinsk, when it was part of Belaoka. Her major was political science, and her minor was literature. Shiori at the time was preparing a paper with a circle of other students. The circle would later form the core group that started what many came to later call the Paper Cup. A series of actions that would in the end lead to the declaration of the sovereign state of Zakrain in the winter of 1992. She first came to my shop to print some flyers during the spring of 1992. After that she started to come fairly regularly, always with a small print jobs. She was hanging the flyers on the walls of the university. A month later, we were on the first name terms. She always had a few friends around with her. It was hard not to fall in love with her cheerfulness. Summer 1992. When summer came around, Shiori's paper was close to being completed, and the campaign around it was quickly gaining the traction. The university had green-lighted the project, and my print shop saw a great increase in revenue. Many flyers, pamphlets, and even posters were being printed. Having, printing store of sorts right around the university, it definitely will get you some money. Maybe not super amazing money, but it will get you there. Especially around the time when, students are really forced to give out the projects of theirs. Yeah. Many flyers, pamphlets, and even posters were being printed. And if it was even possible, Shiori's aura radiated even more happiness than before. Unlike any other political campaign, her engagement was reserved. It was as if being in that position calmed her down. I guess that's why so many people started following her, and why I started getting new customers in the form of student writers, wanting to print their books independently. One of them was Aglae Garisuki. I remember her coming on a rainy evening, very close to closing time. She convinced me to print and bind one copy of her novella. That novella was called Return to Belaoka. And I merely skimmed the pages on that day, but already then I could see how that became the defining work from which everything else was derived. And how it brought Agla and Shiori together, and why they became such good friends. Autumn of 1992. The success of Return to Belaoka around the university and the interest that Agla has woken for literature led to the circle of students meeting at my print shop, waiting for their flyers to be finished and their books to be bound. They would often spend hours here, so much so that I provided extra seating. I had to take 2 new assistants to help around the shop, since it was getting so much traffic. There was one evening I distinctly remember, when the shop was already clearing out, and Agla and Shiori had a discussion that I dared not interrupt. It went on for an hour after closing time, and both of them apologized deeply for the inconvenience. 2 days later, Shiori introduced the Constitution of Zakrainian, and when she brought it to me to print for the first time, she embraced me in tears. "Thank you, Vanya," she said. I carried on with printing, but inside I was frozen, not able to process what happened. Winter of 1992. The paper coup began at the university and spread to include some of the adjacent areas, mostly still within the university grounds. A few days later, the country of Zakrain was called into existence and officially separated from Belaoka. The day Shiori raised the newly created Zakrain flag in the snowy evening in front of all the people at Theatre Square will be forever etched in my memory. Spring of 1993. In January, the Empress of Zakrain has been crowned. She was one of the few people who frequented my print shop. Okay, maybe I should have not said few, because still it wasn't in the text. Never mind. Since she was relatively quiet and mostly listened and read the stories of the others, I didn't really have a chance to get to know her. But she seemed to know me, and didn't stop her visits when she got elected. And that's suspicious looking guy. And although she and Shuri were often talking, her true best friend was Natalie. Never mind. Natalie Kuznetsova, one of the young writers frequenting the shop. Whoops, sorry. I believe the Empress looked up to Natalie, and ever since she became the head of the Zakrain, it seems she was treasuring their friendship even more. But unlike the Empress, I did get to know Natalie just a few months later. Summer of 1993. PolishLynx is born, but that's not important right now. It was a hot summer evening. When Natalie Kuznetsova came to the print shop, very obviously in a feverish state. She asked me to print a story she had written and immediately collapsed on the floor. I delivered the first copy to her in the hospital. It was Florianka, her one and only story. She had written it during the course of 4 nights. Dang, that's crazy. Sounds like me writing a project for the university. Each day in worse condition than the other. The park near the university was where she did the majority of the writing in the night. Taking naps, her condition was steadily worsening. During the day she would sleep, and at night she would write about the moon. A few days later, as the short story was read by more Zakrainians, the Empress addressed everyone at the theater square. It was the most memorable speech she has done, establishing a lead between the literature, the Zakrainian constitution, and the people's sense of belonging. All the while the Empress herself projected a sense of individuality. Shiori and Agla were standing next to me when all of this happened. And since there were some posters I had finished just a few hours before, the three of us went back to my print shop. Autumn of 1993. The autumn of 1993 was the time I like to recall the most. Yeah, I totally remember that time. The bad weather meant a lot of the people involved in matters pertaining to Zakrain gathered in the print shop. I got to know the Empress, Misako, Fyodorova. And soon I started to feel a part of their group. Shiori, Aglae, Natalie, and of course Empress Misako were always the core, with a few people accompanying them at various times. But especially as the shop cleared out for the evening, the 5 of us were almost always last to leave. Even for the fact that I, as the owner, was part of that group, was not such a surprise. Winter of 1993. Over the winter, Shiori and Misako were working hard on achieving international recognition. And while a loophole in the system allowed them to creation of Zakrain, it was another thing entirely to actually get any country to recognize it. The university was running out of funds for the project, and by the last snowfall of the year, none of us had any hope left. But now, new people identifying as Zakrainians and sharing their literary creations made everyone soon forget about those aspirations. Shiori desperately wanted to rewrite the constitution, and Aglae was sharing parts of a large novel she was working on with us. Natalie was often helping out with the printing, and together with Misako, they were mostly talking to other students, whenever they wanted to know something about the project. Spring of 1994. I must have printed at least 10 or 20 short snippets of text for one of the writers, until I noticed it was always the same person, and introduced myself. Even now when I think about it, it is still inconceivable to me that I could have been so blind to what was before me. The writer was Odette Kawamura Sheremenko, and the snippets were the pieces of her novella The Summer. Which makes me wonder, do you guys have this? Come on, website, ATP, project, or visual novels. I think there was something called summer. No, there wasn't. Okay. Boop. I always felt that it would be Aglaé who writes a novel that would change everything. And in many ways she was, not just with Return to Belaoka, but of course also with that cirque. But Odette was who I would always feel closest to. And I will tell everyone who will listen that it wasn't until the publishing of this summer that we really thought of what we did as Zakrain's literature. Summer 1994. Odette's novella completely blindsided me. Just as many others felt the deep reaction and emotional response to Florianka, I felt like for the first time I had found a word that did this to me. I read through the summer in one go, and I remember it was on a Sunday. It was not only the fact that after reading the story I wanted to change. It was also that, as deeply as it touched me, I wasn't overcome with emotion. I didn't suddenly feel that Odette is the best writer in the world. And yet, this summer, I felt like it truly was the best written word that was ever created. Autumn 1994. A new constitution for Zakrain was in effect in autumn that year, and it paved the way for the focus on Zakrainian written works. Aglaé Garisuki's new novel was almost finished, and the popularity of Florianka grew ever more. Odette became a part of our group, and the six of us became even closer. Often I would even prefer to be alone without other people. On non-work days we occasionally met at Natalie's place, just to get a break from the print shop. One time we even organized a walk through the forest trail behind Severovodsk. Because the paths were so narrow, we ended up walking in pairs. I spent almost all of my time with Aglaé, and then walked with Shiori for a while. Misako and Natalie were inseparable, and Odette was sharing Shiori and Aglaé with me. Winter of 1994. That cirque. No matter what you say, no matter how you feel about Zakrain, or about the written works that were published, self-published, at the time by the students, whether they feel like typical student time juvenilia to you, or whether you feel that they are special only to the people who were around at the time. If there is one work that legitimizes the whole era, it is that cirque. The only Zakrainian work to be published by a Belaokian mainstream publishing house. And with its considerable success as well as critical acclaim, it more or less is the only thing that makes everything that happened feel real today. The last memory of our group was near the end of winter. Natalie was collecting all of the works that we had from the people who supported our project. And that one evening, when it once again was only the six of us left. Seeing the list with the titles and publishing days of all the novellas, poems and other written works, Shiori said it first. And it sealed the fate of Zakrain. 2019. I look at a small plaque at the university. Some dates and a list of names. It's all that remains of Zakrain in this place. And yet, when I see their names written, Odette, Shiori, Natalie, Aglaé, and Misako, it all comes back to me. Thank you for these memories. The end? The end! That was interesting. Short story. Interesting one for. Like, you know. I mean, sure. I mean, it just shows there are still, I guess, countries that don't get recognition, right? Around the world. And, well, some somehow manage to get into the world. Anyway, for now, hope you enjoyed. We are probably going to move to another game tomorrow, maybe. If not, well, there is still Katawa Shoujo going, so feel free to drop by there. And yeah, for now, hope you enjoyed. Hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye.